Coming up on Network Africa, war crimes suspect free amidst the chaos in Sudan. Projectile hits medical center in Omdurman. Kenya cult deaths hit 90 as authorities expand operation. This is Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Ladi Akeriduluale. We're going to start off in Sudan, where a former politician wanted for alleged crimes against humanity has confirmed in a statement aired on Sudan's Tabia TV that he and fellow former officials who served under Omar al-Bashir have left jail, adding that he would be ready to appear before the judiciary whenever it starts functioning. Reports emerged earlier this week of a prison break at Kobar, where Ahmad Haroun was serving a sentence alongside the former leader Omar al-Bashir. He claimed they had left with the help of prison guards and the armed forces. General Bashir was ousted by the military after mass protests in 2019 and had been serving a jail sentence for corruption. The Sudanese army says the 79-year-old is currently at a military hospital and was moved there before hostilities broke out. General Bashir is accused by the ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, of leading a campaign of mass killing and rape in Sudan's Darfur region, which he denies. And video released by the Al-Rumi Medical Center in the Sudanese city of Omdurman shows what it says was the aftermath of a projectile hitting the building. The director of public relations at the center, Ahmed Al-Sir, said in a statement that the projectile had pierced the eastern hall and exploded inside it. Thankfully, there was no loss of property or lives. According to Mr. Al-Sir, about 13 people were treated internally for injuries and transferred to Al-Noor Hospital. Fighting in Sudan has paralyzed hospitals and other essential services and left many people stranded in their homes with dwindling supplies of food and water. The WHO has reported 14 attacks on health facilities and is relocating staff to safety. And still on the conflict in Sudan, evacuees of different nationalities fleeing the military conflict there have arrived in Jeddah this morning on a ferry sent by Saudi Arabia to bring them to safety. Footage shows the ferry sailing in with crowds of people on the deck, followed by the evacuees disembarking and getting onto waiting buses. Saudi Arabia said the evacuees included 13 Saudi citizens and 1,674 individuals from some 56 countries, including the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, Egypt, South Africa, Senegal, India, and Thailand. And the Ghanaian Foreign Affairs Ministry says 82 Ghanaians trapped in Sudan have been evacuated to safety. The ministry said 77 of them had been moved to Gedaref in the east of the country, from where they'll be transported to the Ethiopian border town of Metamon. They will be received by Ghanaian officials and then processed for repatriation to Ghana. Separately, 3 Ghanaian footballers and 2 other people working for an Australian mining company are being sent to the Egyptian post of Wadi Halfa through northern Sudan. The exact number of Ghanaians stranded in Sudan is unknown, but authorities say they are working with the honorary consul in Khartoum to evacuate all their nationals. Meanwhile, Downing Street reports that a 4th UK flight has left Sudan's capital, Khartoum, bringing the total number of evacuees to 301. The British government says a total of 8 planes will depart Sudan by the end of the day. The Prime Minister's official spokesman adds that the majority of people on the planes are British nationals, but some will be allies. And a U.S. brokered ceasefire in Sudan appears to be partially holding, but there's no sign the warring parties are ready to seriously negotiate. That's according to the UN Special Envoy on Sudan. Fighting broke out between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces on April the 15th. Both parties agreed to a 72-hour ceasefire beginning on Tuesday after negotiations mediated by the United States and Saudi Arabia. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described the violence and chaos in Sudan as heartbreaking.
Of increased criminality, prisoners being released from detention centers across Khartoum.
These 10 days of violence and chaos are heartbreaking. A prolonged, full-scale war is unbearable to contemplate. Excellencies, the fighting must stop immediately. We need an all-out effort for peace. I call on the parties to the conflict, on Generals Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, Emeti, and the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to silence the guns. It is incumbent on Sudanese leaders to put the interests of their people front and center. This conflict will not and must not be resolved on the battlefield with the bodies of Sudan's people.
I reiterate the call of the UN Secretary General's call for the belligerents to de-escalate, to fully respect and uphold the ceasefire in order to facilitate efforts being deployed. And we must not lose sight of those who are most affected by this spiraling conflict, the people of Sudan. We must remain engaged. The AU will fully continue monitoring closely the situation and keeping this August Council duly informed.
A military plane carrying approximately 19 people evacuated from Sudan landed at Marka Military Airport in Amman yesterday. According to the Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, another would follow carrying another 70 evacuees made up of Jordanians, Europeans and Arabs. An exodus of embassies and aid workers from Africa's third largest country has raised fears that civilians who remain will be in greater danger if an alternative to hostilities is not found before a shaky three-day truce ends tomorrow. The fighting has turned residential areas into battlefields. Air strikes and artillery have killed at least 459 people, wounded more than 4,000, destroyed hospitals and limited food distribution in a nation already reliant on aid for a third of its 46 million people. Foreign countries have airlifted embassy staff out after several attacks on diplomats, including the killing of an Egyptian attaché shot on his way to work.
On this plane we have about 90 people. In the coming plane we have about 70 people that include Jordanians and non-Jordanians, Europeans, other Arabs. The approach is that everybody who needs help, we will provide that help. Also, other countries, European countries, have used Jordan as a base to conduct their own evacuations, and they brought some Jordanian citizens with them. Everybody is cooperating. This is a major humanitarian issue. All of us are working together to make sure that we bring everybody back safe to home. It's a very challenging operation. I mean, we had to move people first on land from Khartoum to Port Sudan, about 800 kilometers, making sure every step of the road that everybody is safe. Then we getting the planes into Port Sudan, again, with a tremendous effort by the Royal Force.
We weren't prepared for this trip, especially that it took us 24 hours to get to Port Sudan. So food was the biggest challenge and exhaustion as well.
The military general who led France's operations to rescue its nationals from Sudan has said France is ready to help other countries trying to extract citizens caught up in the conflict zone. French forces carried out ground missions in Khartoum to rescue its citizens and other Europeans, bringing them to an airstrip outside the capital. They were then flown to Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. Major General Laurent Boite says France believes all its nationals have now been evacuated from Sudan. The United Kingdom and United States are advising their citizens to make their way to safer locations in order to be repatriated from Sudan. Both countries have come under criticism for not doing enough to extract their nationals from that country. And in Nigeria, the federal government is set to begin the evacuation of Nigerian students stranded in Sudan which is currently engulfed in violence following a power struggle between two military generals. According to the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, buses have arrived to evacuate the students. In a tweet, the chairman and CEO of NITCOM, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Ero, appealed that, quote, as our students in Sudan queued up orderly to board their buses to Egypt en route to Nigeria, supervised by Nigerian mission officials in Sudan, let's remember them in our prayers as they journey home. The buses, which were received by the Nigerian evacuation team last night, are to take the students to the Egyptian border, and later they will be airlifted from Egypt to Nigeria. Meanwhile, this latest development in Nigeria's evacuation plan has been confirmed by some of the stranded students who have been sharing their experiences. One of them is Abdullahi Kiari, a student of the International University of Africa in Khartoum. According to him, they had no access to electricity, water, while internet services were also shut down amidst the ongoing violence in the country. He was speaking on our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily, today.
There is an online Google form for Nigerian students to fill. This is how they were able to gather the 3,500 Nigerian students that wanted to leave. Hopefully, all the students will leave today if all the buses arrive. We were told that we are to be moved to Egypt. The buses will move from Khartoum to Egypt, then from there we'll cross the border, and then we'll have our flights to Nigeria. But it's actually difficult and it's a long journey. Right now, as I speak to you, if you go out in the street, you can see buses moving. Some Nigerians have embarked on personal journey. Some have even crossed the border. They are in Ethiopia. Some have already booked their flight to tomorrow. There are generations of Nigerians here in Sudan. Some have been here in Sudan for long during these people that do take a road trip to pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. So they have their own settlement here, an area closer to Khartoum. So there are a lot of Nigerians there. And then recently, around 2022, during all this, what do you call the banditry, there are people that cross from Nigeria, Niger, from Chad, Sudan. So actually, there are a lot of Nigerians here in Khartoum and in Sudan in particular.
Away from the conflict in Sudan, the death toll at the ranch in coastal Kenya owned by a pastor who is accused of leading a religious cult and ordering his followers to starve themselves got to 90 as the country's interior minister announced an expanded operation at the site. The new figure came after police exhumed 17 more bodies. The total number of those rescued while starving at the ranch now stands at 34. The Kenyan Red Cross Society's latest figure on the missing is 213. Pastor Paul Mackenzie, who heads the Good News International Church, is accused of luring his followers to the ranch near the town of Malindi. He allegedly told them to fast to death in order to meet Jesus before burying them in shallow graves spread across his land. He was arrested after police raided the property earlier this month, and he remains in police custody. Interior Minister in Kenya, Kithure Kindiki, says that the security team will upscale search and rescue missions to save as many lives as possible. The entire 800-acre parcel of land that is part of the Shakahola Ranch is hereby declared a disturbed area and an operational zone, says Mr. Kindiki while visiting the area. The minister said there would be a turning point on how the country handles threats caused by religious extremism and is looking into another suspected cult in the same Kilifi County. And at least 57 bodies have been washed ashore after 2 migrant boats sank in the Mediterranean off different towns in western Libya. One survivor, Bassam Mahmoud from Egypt, said there were about 80 passengers on one of the boats that set up for Europe at around 2 a.m. on Tuesday. There was an argument as the boat was sinking, but the man in charge refused to stop. We started fighting for our lives and screaming, asking for help until someone came to rescue us. It was an indescribable scene. 11 bodies, including that of a child, were recovered off Karbuli in eastern Tripoli. The migrants were from Pakistan, Syria, Tunisia, and Egypt. The International Organization for Migration says this month 441 migrants and refugees drowned in early 2023 while attempting to cross the Mediterranean from North Africa to Europe. the most deaths in the past 6 years over a 3-month period. A decade after overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi in a NATO-backed uprising in 2011, Libya became the main departure point for mostly African migrants trying to cross to Europe. But Tunisia has since taken over from Libya as the most popular departure point. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has said the governing African National Congress ANC party has resolved that South Africa should quit the International Criminal Court, which last month issued an arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin. The warrant against Mr. Putin in March means that Pretoria, due to host the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa bloc summit this year, would have to detain him upon arrival. Mr. Ramaphosa said the decision, which follows a weekend meeting of the ANC, was reached because of what is perceived as the court's unfair treatment of certain countries. The arrest warrant against Mr. Putin followed accusations that the Kremlin unlawfully deported Ukrainian children. On whether or not South Africa would arrest Mr. Putin, Mr. Ramaphosa said that matter is under consideration. Let's talk now to our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia. Betty speaks to us, of course, from Johannesburg in South Africa. Good evening to you, Betty. Thank you for your time. Welcome.
Thank you, Ladi.
What's the background to this announcement from Mr. Ramaphosa?
Well, I guess South Africa as a country, not just Ramaphosa, well, he's the leader of the country. They're kind of under pressure. They're frustrated. They want to host BRICS, and they want to host their friend along with the other leaders as well. So he said that, but events have overtaken it because a few hours later, the presidency, represented, of course, by the presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, released a statement and a voice note saying that the president spoke in error, that the country remains signatory to the Rome Statute, so there's no withdrawal. And that is in line with the agreement at the ANC 55, that's the 55th Congress of the ANC in December last year. We've gone through this back and forth. Remember the Sudanese presidential visit a few years back under former President Jacob Zuma, and the attempt to arrest him, which never happened because they found a way to wriggle out of it, despite the court judgment saying that he had to be arrested because the Rome Statute, or at least segments of it, relevant segments of it, had been domesticated in the country. It's part of the country's law. So that's the background to that. We've heard the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Fikile Mbalula, speaking after that as well, saying there's no withdrawal happening. We're still part of the ICC, where we've signed up to the Rome Statute. We're still there. There's no withdrawal, and that they're considering a legislative amendment, sort of, in order to domesticate other or all the articles, including Article 98, which the US uses to get away with its own aspect of that Rome Statute. Article 98 basically gives an opportunity for states to engage in international agreements. In the case of the US, it's called the bilateral Article 98 agreements, which exempts the US just for clarity, this is regarding requests to surrender certain suspects. So in the case of the US and some of the countries, mainly in Africa as well, that they have these bilateral Article 98 agreements, you will not surrender, or states are exempt American citizens from the jurisdiction of the ICC. So South Africa is looking at that. Issue of Article 98 also talks about issues of immunity, but there's a lot of confusion depending on who is reading and how they're reading. The AU or many African countries read it differently from how some other experts read that Article 98 as well. So they're between a rock and a hard place, how to handle it. BRICS summit is in August, which is not too far away, and there's so many things planned for that meeting. Hopefully, they will find a way out of it.
Well, this confusion, this seeming confusion continues because if it is that the president spoke in error earlier today, as clarified by his spokesman, as you said, then the problem is still there, because the Russians and the Russian president would not like to be embarrassed by the kind of situation that occurred with President al-Bashir way back, I believe it was 2017 or so. Yeah, 2017. At that time, he wouldn't want that. And President Ramaphosa wants to host him in South Africa. So the problem is still there. Do you see, you know, them looking at it? Because they've been back and forth severally on this same issue. There was a threat to withdraw even at the time of President al-Bashir's visit then.
Al-Bashir, yes.
Yeah, so we still have the same problem, don't we?
The problem remains. And South Africa is trying to find a way out, but it's finding a way out a bit too late, because the BRICS summit is quite close. And they wouldn't want embarrassment as well for the country, because there are bodies that are ready to go to court and to get, probably to force the government, like in the case of Zuma, the litigation center got that judgment from the High Court saying that you have to act according to your obligations regarding the Rome Statute. So that will definitely happen. There are people who are waiting for that to happen. Whether it will happen or is another thing, but I doubt if the Russian president, as you said, will want to go through that kind of thing. Not much is being given away, not much is being said, but you can see the frustration for the government. But COVID has provided options, you know, for people. Probably he will join online, but I know that the desire is for them to host him physically. And when that probably was confirmed, the warrant of arrest was issued. So the problem hasn't gone away, it's still there. We'll just have to keep watching to see how, even if they have that legislative amendment, it may take time to have negotiations under Article 98 and get it done by August. So they may end up having to probably host him from afar.
Indeed. Ivan, as we wrap this conversation down, I just want, I mean, someone had mentioned that, you know, we also have to look at the logistics of the actual act of arresting a Russian president anywhere, you know, and who can actually do that. But I mean, beyond that, do you think this back and forth over the possibility of withdrawal could have any kind of impact on the decisions to be made by other big countries outside South Africa on the continent, like Kenya, which the former president and the current president had also been indicted by the ICC at some point?
I'm not quite sure. You know, it's a singular sign-up, it's not collective. So each country to its own. I know that Nigeria hosted al-Bashir. Remember, I think it was an eight conference or something. He finished his summit, Nigeria didn't hand him over, and he left. So each country has found itself in a spot regarding this. I'm not quite sure, but people are watching to see how this will happen, or maybe how they can revisit the Rome Statutes to see how they too can find their own ways out regarding things of interest for them, especially in this issue of this Article 98 that I talked about. So the South African government also talked about strengthening or invigorating the push to actualize the Malabo Protocol regarding the African Court on Human Rights and Human and People's Rights, where they will focus on that and have the ICC as a spot of last resort. So maybe it's time for everyone to look at how they can make the best of it. And I know South Africa is insisting on equal and consistent application of international law. We know what they mean by that. So we're watching to see how South Africa will do, but they're not pulling out, so they have to obey. That means it's not likely, except something changes. It's not likely. It's going to be hectic, even from within, resistance from within, to have a Putin arrested within South Africa.
We'll be keeping an eye on that, we trust. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Divia, thank you for your time and for staying on top of the reporting there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladi.
And finally, on the program, Nigeria and South Africa have had excellent relations for many years, and that's according to its former Foreign Affairs Minister and former permanent representative at the United Nations, who is currently the Chief of Staff to the Nigerian President. Professor Ibrahim Gambari was speaking in South Africa while being conferred with an honorary doctorate degree at the University of Johannesburg.
I've been honored before by the government of South Africa when in 2012 they conferred on me the Order of the Companion of Oliver R. Tambo, which is the highest award for foreigners, including distinguished recipients all over the world in terms of their support for the anti-apartheid struggle. So this is a second honor by giving me an honorary doctoral degree, which is even more in line with my own academic background and in recognition by them, they said, of the contribution I've been privileged to make on behalf of my country as ambassador to the United Nations and with the support of my country as the United Nations Under Secretary General for almost 30 years.
Professor Ibrahim Gambari, Chief of Staff to the President. And that's where we anchored this edition of Network Africa. Thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akari Dulali. Do have a good evening.